McConnell's contract is extended, and now the next question is, what does this mean for the Pacers in future seasons? Where do their future finances stand? Can they really keep Myles Turner? What moves might they have to make? Boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Monday. Hope you're having or had a nice weekend, depending on if you have today off. And welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI. And today, we are talking more TJ McConnell. The timing from a podcast perspective wasn't great, but little bonus pod over the weekend. For those of you who missed it, the initial reaction to the McConnell extension from Fever Sky. And today we can get into the ripple effects, what this means for the rest of the Pacers roster, what their decision-making could look like to really sort this out in the next 12 to 18 months, where this is all headed, and many other cap and free agency related things. We didn't get official details on this McConnell deal, which I think I hoped would happen over the weekend. Actually, as of me talking right now, it's 1:15 in the morning on September 2nd. Has not been announced. It has not happened yet. So there are no official details to know because there's no contract yet. It's going to happen. It got reported. But I was hopeful to know the exact specifics, what the amount starts at, what the guarantees are, because that would make it easier to do some of the math we're going to do today and talk about the total value of the contract and all that kind of stuff. I will make some assumptions today. And I would like you guys to bear with me if they become inaccurate. I will say something, but my prediction is that, one, his contract starts as low as it possibly can to make it fit within the 4 for 45 parameters because of the way the cap is growing and the Pacers' tax realities next year. They would like as much wiggle room as possible. So I think it will start as low as possible in 2025-26. And I strongly suspect that there is some non-guaranteed money at the end of the deal. Very strongly suspect, given the history of McConnell's contracts, given the Pacers' history with giving contracts to players older than, let's say, 34 even, I bet there's not fully guaranteed on this. So take all the numbers with a grain of salt because that could be inaccurate, both those things I just said, but those are my strong suspicions. And so what we're going to have to do really quickly is explain something, and that is what this could start at, right? Because currently his contract has bonuses, and with extensions, bonuses can stay in the deal. They can go up or down 8%. So in fact, if his bonuses go up 8%, his base salary could be as low as like $9.6 million in year one of this deal, and it still reaches the 4 for 45 parameters. So I'll start from that number to do some of this math because it gives the Pacers the most rosy outlook possible, but give or take a few $100,000 as I talk about what all the stuff we're about to say is, because there's a lot to this. So first of all, thinking like that, if it starts somewhere between a base salary, not full cap hit, but a base salary of 9.6 to 10.4 million, here's some contracts that have been signed just in the last 2 years. The cap barely went up this year. So last year and this year, pretty similar cap environments, right? Dennis Schroeder, $12.7 million per year. Who's better, him or TJ McConnell, right? Kobe White, remember the perception of him. He got a lot better. The perception of him last summer was not very high. He got $12 million per year. Gabe Vincent, coming off a season with the Heat, got $11 million per year. Trey Jones with the Spurs got $10 million per year. And then there's a little gap. Javon Carter got $6.5 million per year. Ayo Dosunmu, $7 million. Reggie Jackson, just over $5 million. This year, not many point guards or reserve point guards got paid, right? Chris Paul was the closest comparable contract at 12-ish million after a not good season for him, at least with Golden State. Chris Dunn was at $5.3 million. DeAnthony Melton, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, all guards, but not point guards, around $12 million. So good backup guards or good backup point guards, there's a range. And McConnell's right in it. And if not, a little under what I would have expected given the numbers we saw for Schroeder and Trey Jones last summer specifically. So I suppose in that way, it makes a lot of sense given the market. And again, I already have stated my thoughts on the tradability of it. So what does that mean now, right? What does that mean now going forward for the Pacers as they try to build their team? Because the reason, for those of you who've been listening all summer, I predicted this would not happen, had nothing to do with McConnell's ability or nothing to do with the Pacers' desire to keep him. It had everything to do with the Pacers' businesses and their finances and their team construction, right? Because they are going to be flirting with the luxury tax again next year. And that, and a key point I want to stress here, right? This episode is called The Ripple Effects of TJ McConnell's Extension. But really what we're saying is the ripple effects of everything they did this summer, because Andrew Nembhard's extension and Obi Toppin's contract and Pascal Siakam's contract and TJ McConnell's new contract, even really Haliburton's because of when that's different, but still, like, there's a lot of everything signed this summer that changes their financial reality next summer is related to this exercise. And McConnell's just the last kind of major domino that makes it the case in this way. So right this second, a key reminder, by the way, the answer to a lot of questions we're going to ask in the next 10 to 15 minutes of this podcast could just be they pay the tax and none of this matters at all. And I'm talking too much about stuff that doesn't matter. But right this second, me talking to you, Pacers have 10 players with a guaranteed salary or almost certainly guaranteed salary for next season. That would be Tyrese Haliburton, Pascal Siakam, Obi Toppin, Aaron Nesmith, TJ McConnell, Ben Mathurin, Jarris Walker. Those two could technically be no, but they're going to have their option picked up. Ben Shepherd, Andrew Nembhard, and Johnny Furphy. James Johnson, Cole Swider, those are one-year deals. James Wiseman, Kendall Brown have team options for next year. It's possible that it's a little different than the 10 I just said, but those are the 10 almost for sure and basically for sure contracts the Pacers have guaranteed for next year. The total money of those deals is a little over $164 million. That's already $10 million over the cap, right? So forget about cap space. We're not going to talk about that at all. What we are going to talk about is the luxury tax. And really, we're going to talk about aprons, which is crazy that we're at that point. But we're really talking about the luxury tax. The luxury tax for next season is currently projected to be $187.89 million. Whew. That's a lot. And so, with that in mind, and with the Pacers number in mind, they're already like $23 million from that without Turner, without Isaiah Jackson, without Wiseman, without any of those guys. They're $23 million away. But that's not where this exercise of predicting next year starts. The first apron's $195 million, about $8 million over that, right? So if that is their distance from the tax right now. But guess what? The Pacers have their first round pick next year. They could trade it away, but they have it right now. If you add in a salary for a 20th pick or whatever, which would be about $3.6 million of a cap hit, that gets them $19.8 million away from the tax with 11 players. So the starting question is all about Myles Turner, right? And that is a great question. So he cannot be extended this season. He got renegotiated on his last contract, which means he can't extend for 3 years from the date of that. And that will not happen during the season. So he's going to be an unrestricted free agent next year. It's a fact, right? Now, what this year looks like will be vital. If he's awesome again and plays 77 games, they're going to really want to keep him. In fact, they should really want to keep him anyway, because as I said with Jimmy Cook on our what are the odds predictions, and I got that wrong for McConnell already, was, well, even if they need to figure out what they're doing at center or they want to change their resources, they can't replace him. They can't pay someone else as much as they are able to pay Myles Turner next year, and they should want to keep him. $19.8 million from the tax is not enough. It's just not, right? Centers now, good starting centers, top 10, 11, 12, whatever. Hoops Hype just did their center rankings. Myles Turner is 11th. So I'll just use 11. Top 11 centers who can contribute to the postseason for teams that are trying to win in the playoffs cost more than $19.8 million. They just do. They cost close to $25 million per year. We've seen that with many extensions signed this summer and last. Kristaps Porzingis, Jared Allen, Brook Lopez. Some guys Turner's better than, some that are better than him. But that's his range. That's what it's going to take, is something in the mid-20s to high 20s with 10% cap growth coming from now to next year. And so they don't have that room right now under the tax. So again, reminder, before we continue, the answer to these questions could just be pay the tax. Do it. Just do it, right? Maybe they want to. Maybe they're good enough again to want to do it. They don't just pay the tax. They also lose the distribution from other teams, which is significant. I don't know how the Pacers are requested or demanded in the front office to think about the tax, but it's a line that teams consider. And if they're going to be close to it, they're going to try to be under it. So if Turner on a fair deal is already putting you over, doesn't even account for the rest of your team. Should they want to do this? What should they do now? How can they address this? What's this going to look like? What do I think should happen? We have so much more to get to coming right up. Before we dive into all that, though, we got to talk about Gametime, the best way to get tickets to the events near you. They have a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Plus, right now, Labor Day offer if you're in the area for Diamondbacks Dodgers. Check that out with Gametime. But really, their super deals are awesome, as I just said. They have lots of other great ways to buy tickets for concerts, sports, theater, whatever you're going to. They have their customize your spot feature, all sorts of ways to make it really easy to find what you're looking for. I love their views from your seat feature. I love their toggle the hidden fees feature. Turn it on. It was spot on. I saw the price I was going to pay. They have a low price guarantee, lowest price guarantee, to be clear. Event cancellation protection, job loss protection. No guesswork. It's perfect. It's the best way to buy tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply, but create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen needs to be Locked On NBA because I was on it again with Jackson Gatlin talking some Pacers and the state of the Eastern Conference. Speaking of the state of the East, by the way, tomorrow on this very show, we already recorded it. Shane Young is back for his yearly look at the East, where the Pacers stand in it, where they could end up. We're pretty similar in our ranking of the top 8 in the East. A lot of big picture stuff. Very fun. Love talking with Shane. Let's keep going on McConnell and where this lands the Pacers. So even with just Turner, right, and that $19.8 million from the tax number, even just with Myles Turner, okay, maybe they sign him and they're a little over. Well, they still would only have 12 players. They'd still need 3 minimums. So they really have even more wiggle room from the tax to consider. Right? What do they do about this? Because, and I was doing this exercise with Derek Kramer. Thank you, Derek, for getting me on the thinking here correctly, is like, it has not been this Pacers front office's MO to lose really good players because of spending or contributors because of spending. When they have had spending, I don't know what the right word is, concerns, when they've had lines to think about the cap, the tax, whatever, they have always found a way to make the best players work, which is smart. Sometimes that has required them doing other stuff. So just a list of some things in the Kevin Pritchard era that you could consider money-saving moves and what it allowed the Pacers to do or who it helped them keep, right? Stretching Monte Ellis. That's kind of a money saver, although they're still paying that out. That allowed them to sign Bojan Bogdanovic and Darren Collison, right? A better use of cap space that time. When they were flirting with the tax the summer, they signed Justin Holiday using the tax mid-level. They traded TJ Leaf and a second-round pick for Jalen McHugh to clear room under the tax, right? That was getting off of bad money to get a better player at Justin Holiday. Worked out. They had to, the next year, with tax concerns, lose Doug McDermott. They kept TJ McConnell. They lost Doug McDermott. Doug McDermott, to say what you will about his talent level, he got $14 million in free agency per year that summer. Clearly was valuable around the league and was specifically valuable to the Pacers because of his fit with Sabonis. Spending power made it hard to keep him. But the stuff they had done around that time before McDermott left the team was stuff like take TJ Warren into their cap space and get Malcolm Brogdon and extend Domantas Sabonis and sign Justin Holiday to a contract that actually makes sense. Did they use the tax mid-level? Maybe they just used non-bird. I can't remember. Either way, they kept Justin Holiday, right? They did stuff to keep good players, but that meant they could not pay Doug McDermott that summer. And instead they had other players they had to take care of. And then they made a bunch of trades. And some of those had to be cost cutting. After they did the Haliburton trade, they were flirting with the tax. So they traded Jalen Smith or Torrey Craig for Jalen Smith. And that was, at the time, pretty clearly a cost-cutting trade. And yet it worked out fantastically. Obviously, Jalen Smith was really good for the Pacers at times, but that was kind of so they could function after getting Tyrese Haliburton. I feel like I'm going through too many of these. They had to dump Edmund Sumner after his injury because of how close that team was to various lines in many ways. And then they used that to get Brad Wanamaker in the door and Kiefer Sykes, whatever. Like they needed a backup point guard more than they needed Edmund Sumner. So they have always, when they have needed money to do what they want to do, shed money that they find less appealing to pay the player that would be more appealing to them. And so to stop there, the discussion would be if they want to keep Myles Turner and they agree with what I just said, that They can't lose him for nothing, and they can't replace him on the market because of what his salary would be, and they can't or won't pay the tax, whatever their reality happens to be. Then they have shown in the past that they would find a way to shed money elsewhere to keep Myles Turner. So that is my operating assumption on how this could go, depending on how the next season goes. A lot could change, obviously. But how? How would they get under? How would they get farther away from the tax to keep Myles Turner, right? Would they trade away players? Or would they not keep Turner to stand under the tax? Would they do something else? Would they stretch somebody? They don't really have anybody worth stretching at all, right? It's really hard to come up with a good solution, right? Would they call it a success if to keep Myles Turner, they have to trade Obi Toppin away for no salary back? How would they even be able to trade away Obi Toppin for little to no salary back? Is that even possible in their reality? Or something with the young guys, right? The guys whose salaries may not match their role perfectly. The recent lottery picks in Ben Mathurin and Jarris Walker, although one or both of them should be looking at significant roles by then. But you get what I'm saying, right? How did they figure this out? Is trading away 3 players for just 1 or 2? Is that actually worth it? Their depth is their strength. What does that do for your money? And if you're trading away players who are good, what does getting picks back do for you? You're trying to win now. Like, yeah, you can trade them later, but you're trying to win right now. So there's just a lot of factors that kind of push against each other. But here's the factor that pushes the hardest. Losing Myles Turner for nothing is so dumb. It's so stupid, right? 10-year vet with the same team, really good fit. Losing him for nothing is dumb. So what can they do about it? Do they trade their pick before it even happens while they're on the clock? Do they try to shed money by trading, somebody for something less? I don't know. It kind of depends on what player's salary feels like it matches their role the least, is what I would kind of think about in the coming season. Who fits into what, how this all looks. I'll be fascinated really about a couple guys. Obi Toppin, how he looks in his role and how he plays. Ben Mather and how he looks in his role and how he plays. Even McConnell a little bit. Those would be the guys that I think about, what could they do with that money compared to the role those guys have? And what makes sense to do here? Or could they just swing for the fences and trade 3 guys for a star that's available and use all the rest of their first and some of their young guys? There's lots of paths that could open up. But what we've seen from the Pacers historically, and I like to thank Derek Kramer for getting me looking in this, is they have always kept the right guys, or they have always made the moves required to keep the right guys. And that is smart. That's what every team should or do or try to do. But it's not that we haven't seen the Pacers have to do some sort of considerations with cost cutting before. They just have to maybe figure this out. They're going to have some ripple effects from this, from all the moves they've made. And they're going to have to figure that out next year, whether that is just paying the tax and starting their repeater clock now if they're willing to do so, whether that is actually losing somebody to keep the players that they deem are the right players, or whether that's something else that is not foreseeable right now. Obviously, the basketball part of this will answer a lot of the questions. But I think that is the key ripple effect that everybody asks about. What does this mean for Myles Turner? So remember, highest level, and what fans should want is their favorite team pays the tax and keeps Myles Turner and all the players, and they are as good as possible, right? And of course, that's the best. But reality and the repeater tax being a thing that exists, so it actually matters when you start paying the tax and when teams think about it, is they will have to think about these things. So how the season plays out is going to have influence. So it's hard to make predictions right now. But if I was to make predictions about who could be moved or what could be moved, their first round pick, Toppin, Mathurin, McConnell, and even Jarris, I think would be the names that I think stand out the most. But anyone like who is a positive value contract, like significantly, is hard to move in a money shedding deal because you're losing value and the contract at that point, right? It's just really hard to come up with the right solution. And I'm not suggesting they trade away anybody to do this yet. They need all the information they can possibly get, but they are going to be and are an expensive team next summer. And that's fine. They're good. They made the conference finals. You're expensive when that happens, but they have to figure out what they're going to do now. And having a locked in somewhere between 9.6 and 10.4 million for TJ McConnell next season means these are going to be considerations that are happening all the time. We're going to talk about this constantly, every month, right? What does this mean for the future? How do they figure this out? Because next summer, they're not going to have a lot of flexibility to do anything. And in fact, a team in their situation should want to make their first round pick to get a cheap player in the door, right? Especially because they don't have their 2026 first rounder. And the cap growth is 10%, is supposed to be with the new TV deal, 10% every year for the next while. So that means they're really only going to be dealing with this for a short amount of time before the cap grows by more than their player raises, and they slowly get farther and farther away and can breathe and add talent and have more flexibility. It could be a little longer than this. I'd have to run a lot more numbers than I did for this exercise. But off the top of my head, it looks fairly easy for them to be under in 2 years, even with keeping some guys, right? They just said the right things or pay guys correctly. But next year specifically is this unique window of cap growth, of timing of free agents, of success for the Pacers, of their ascent, where they're going to have to think about this. They're going to have to think about either how they get out of this, what players they would trade away for less money, or who they would just lose. And losing McConnell for nothing would have stunk, but that was a path that was available to them before that is no longer available to them as a way to shed money. They could always trade him during the season. They could always trade him next summer. He can't be traded during the season. Never mind. He can't be traded during the season because of the way his contract is now structured with this extension. He could always be traded next summer. So can anybody. Anybody could be traded. But it's just, this is going to be such a huge story. And I've been talking about this since even before last free agency started. I talked about it after the Siakam trade. For those of you who remember, they're going to be looking at the tax, right? And now it's happening. And I actually think it's very interesting that their initial response to being in the situation is extend, keep. Because what I said was, and what I have said, and I'm just rambling. Now I'm just kind of inserting my own thoughts into things. What I said, even about Obi's free agency, is keeping good players, especially in the Pacers market, keeping player rights, especially when they're positive value things, is what you should do every time. Right? Keep the player, figure it out. If they have positive value, great. You get something for them. You can trade them for stuff, for contracts, whatever. That's great, but there is a point where you have too many contracts, even if they're all good. And so I have found this interesting to say, is this actually going to be what happens? So are they going to have too many good deals and be leveraged to the point where they're not as good of deals because they have too many good deals? Or is it going to be easy to wiggle out of this because they're all good deals and they're all tradable? These are things I think about now. And McConnell's extension and Nembhard's extension and Toppin's new deal and Siakam's new deal. And I'm probably forgetting one thing. But all the stuff that happened this summer now points to next year being very fascinating. The next 12 months, 18 months. And remember another thing, the last thing I'll add in. They don't have to be under the tax by the time next season starts. A team does not pay the tax until all their salaries are paid for the whole season. They have the whole season to get under with their cap hits. So that gives them really about, I can't do this math fast enough, 19 months, 18 months to actually sort this out. But it is going to be a big matter of discussion. But the more important discussion is they're a good team and they have a very strong core locked up for a very long time. Can they make it as strong as possible? Can they make the right moves to make that happen? Does that require keeping Turner? Those are the final questions. Let's talk about a couple more roster things and news items that have come across the wire, because we have talked a lot about TJ McConnell, his extension last Friday and today. So more roster stuff, different roster stuff to close out today's show. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Kids, they're always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. What is something you'd like to learn? Gardening, a new language, chess like me right now, or maybe finally how to beat your best friend in bowling. Well, therapy can help you connect with your sense of wonder, because your back to school era can come at any age. Therapy can be helpful for lots of stuff. Learning positive coping skills, learning how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It is not just for people who have experienced major trauma. If you are thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. Switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Not a ton of movement in the NBA of late. Steph Curry's extension, Locked On Warriors for more on that, although I plugged that last week. But the big move since McConnell's extension was Ivica Zubac extends with the Clippers. Locked On Clippers will have more on that deal in LA. I like that one. I like Zubac quite a bit. As a player, not a ton of roster stuff to update you guys on since we last talked, because we did do news last week and covered the Kyle Mangus, Cameron McGriff moves. They're both out and waived already. Dakota Mathias has been waived officially. Remember, if you recall, the Purdue wing signed an Exhibit 10 last week. It even said with the Mad Ants in the press release, he's going to be in the G League. That was obvious. And then they waived him. People said, why'd they do this? They had him for 2 days. Again, every contract signed by a player who's not going to be on the roster, they're going to sign and waive him, likely in quick succession. It's just about G League rights. They are not doing it for actual training camp or anything. And they're not looking for that player to prove something to them. Just about G League rights. The Madnets don't have his rights yet. They're going to have to make a trade at some point. I suppose I should check the G League transaction log before saying that. But the last time I checked, it had not been announced by the Mad Ants and was not in the G League transaction filters. At some point, the Mad Ants will trade for Matthias's G League rights, and he will play for the Mad Ants, but he's now been waived. So the Pacers roster is down to 19 again. They could, in theory, sign 2 players at any time as they finish up their offseason, but I don't think they will. My guess is that they'd go into training camp with 19, like they did 2 years ago with David Servitas being the 19th. Last year, they only had 18. They like to use their resources for the guys that they know will be competing for playing time, be a part of their future, all sorts of stuff like that. So more Exhibit 10 signings will come, but right now, the first round of shuffles of Exhibit 10s by the Pacers is done. Something that stood out to me that isn't like that standoutish, but is still just fascinating. Doug McDermott's still a free agent. And I don't think, and by I don't think, I mean, the Pacers just pretty much can't bring him back. They don't have room for him on the team. They don't have the money. But I'm very surprised. Like, he shot it really well with the Spurs last year. He's not washed. He did have a bad run with the Pacers, obviously. But he shot 37.5% in the playoffs and had his best playoff run of his career. Like, he's definitely not washed. I'm surprised he's not on a team. He shot 40% or better from deep all but one season since 2017-18. Since the Pacers traded away Paul George, he's been 40% or better the whole time, except for one season, right? He's super good. Super good. He's still not on a team. I went through the exercise with somebody of what teams have roster spots and what teams might not actually use their roster spots because of money. And there's something like 9 to 12 actual spots left on teams. And it might be less than that, depending on how these teams are thinking about their Exhibit 10s or converting 2s or something like that. It's looking pretty unlikely Doug McDermott's going to hit a team this year, at least to start the season. I think that's very interesting. Doug McDermott's better than that. But from a Pacers perspective, that's not a big deal. He's just like the last domino of their free agent kind of orbit, right? With everybody else having found a new home or staying with a team, he's just out there. He's just kind of floating out there in the nether. It's really, really peculiar to me. Like, even Isaiah Wong did summer league with the Suns. You know, Jalen Smith obviously signed somewhere else. All the Mad Ants guys have new homes except for Elfrid Payton. You know, it's just very odd to me that we don't know much about Doug McDermott's future this deep into the offseason. That, though, is all the Pacers roster updates that really exist right now. We've got a lot of news stuff in the next news coming, including Hoops Hype ranking all these positions and where the Pacers players landed on it. Tyrese Haliburton talked about Team USA recruiting in a bunch of interviews with the up in Oshkosh. So lots of stuff coming the next time we do news. Tomorrow on this very podcast, we'll be talking about the Eastern Conference with Shane Young, the Pacers' place in it, where the good teams have gotten better or worse, what the top 8's going to look like, all sorts of stuff like that. Later in the week, we'll do power forward best seasons in Pacers history. We'll do over-unders, all sorts of fun stuff. I can't wait. And the How the New Guys Can Help Part 2 featuring Johnny Furphy, Tristan Newton, and Enrique Freeman. I wrote the Johnny Furphy story already if you want some more stizzats on the Pacers rookie from Kansas. Hope you guys enjoyed today's show and learned something about McConnell's extension or the Pacers' future or how they are going to figure this out. If you have any questions, you can either, if you're watching on YouTube, comment down below, or if you're listening on audio or you're listening on YouTube and still want to find me the easiest way, on Twitter at Tony R. East. That's a great way to do it. Or the Twitter account Locked On Pacers. I had someone tweet at me and say, hey, I couldn't find your email, so I'm going to do it here. I'm not going to give you my email. Please tweet at me. Emails stress me out from a basketball conversation perspective. But thank you guys for listening. Hope you're enjoying a long weekend if you're having one. If not, I hope you're having a wonderful day. We will see you tomorrow.